Hindu arguments. I could do that. It was the Christians who were giving me the most trouble. And I wasn't most of them, to be sure. Sadly, I think it's a fact that many Christians do not know how to defend their faith.
Right.
And I capitalized on that.
Yeah.
I would often use their ignorance of their own faith to say, oh, the Bible doesn't say Jesus is God, or oh, the Bible is interpreted many different ways, and you can easily show how it's compatible with Islam in these areas, and it's corrupt in these other areas, and these kinds of things. So I was taking advantage of that ignorance.
Yes.
But some of the objections stuck with me. And some of the things I have to think about for a long time and say, wait a minute, this is a little more serious than just a 5-minute argument. I have to give this some very serious thought. But I never intended to actually listen to the arguments.
Yeah.
My intention was always to refute them.
Right.
So as I got into college...
Well, I'm sorry.
Sure.
For example, what might have been a couple of those points that really stuck with you and you had to ponder more than just those that you could easily have an answer for? Do you remember any of them?
Well, what was interesting was it was just the right question sometimes.
Yeah.
I would present an argument to a Christian that the Bible's corrupt.
Yeah.
And I would get a blank look, like, really? And I would say, yeah, it's translated a million different ways by a million different people and all these things. I got one that stuck with me. This was I was like 18 years old, and someone said, when? Where? How?
Present your evidence.
Yeah, give me something more than it was translated a bunch of different times.
Right, okay.
And this is but an example of, I was ready with something to discuss, but it actually got me thinking about it. Well, yeah, when?
Okay.
And that actually figures in a little more later on into my, my journey.
Okay.
The when, specifically, was a very important question for me.
Right.
And many Muslims won't read the Bible to understand it because of the danger that exists of what happening what happened to me.
Yes.
You know, God's word says that it will not return unfruitful.
They're afraid
not
of it,
return
aren't they,
void.
in some cases.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that, because it has power in and of itself. In and of itself, it has power. Now, I believe
than any two-edged sword.
Absolutely. Now, I believe in all the, and evidence was a big deal to me.
Yeah.
I'm a Thomas.
Yeah.
I can't come to faith in any way. I didn't come to faith in any way simply tell me the gospel, I'll believe it, and I'll sign on.
Yeah.
For those who can do that, God bless them. I didn't. That wasn't me.
Right.
I needed to be hit over the head with a hammer, the hammer of evidence, and I, thankfully,
he's got one.
He's got a big one.
Praise the Lord.
So I began to read the Qur'an a little differently too, and I came across a verse that I had read 50 times before that, and it's in the Qur'an. It's found in Al-Ma'idah. Which is the 5th chapter, verse 47. And it says, let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah hath revealed therein. If any do fail to judge by the light of what Allah hath revealed therein, they are no better than those who rebel. And some translations are actually a little bit more harsh about those who don't believe what God has revealed.
Right.
Now, what struck me about this verse, for the very first time, having read it 50 times, is the verbs are all present tense in Arabic.
Yes.
I read it in Arabic, I read it in English, and I see that it's what God has revealed in the gospel.
Yes.
Let the people of the book judge by that book that he has revealed.
And it says specifically here in Arabic, Anjil, and it's gospel. And that's not just like Ahl al-Kitab, people of the book. This is specifically.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the point, is that this one, there are other places here where it talks about people of the book, and it sort of, I won't say it's ambiguous. It's not ambiguous, but it is more general. This is specific. And so I'm also all of a sudden faced with a dilemma. Because in 7th century Saudi Arabia, when these words were spoken, God is telling the people of the gospel to judge by what God has revealed in the gospel. How can they do that if that book is corrupt?
There must have been one existing at that time, right?
Now that's the point. The point is that if you look to, remember the question of when was it corrupted?
Yes. And that's one of the things that started
all of a sudden, this matters more. Now, I know that there are people who debate whether or not this means what this translation and every other translation says.
Right.
But I began a study. The point wasn't whether or not it actually refers to the gospel, and I believe it does.
Yes. Yes.
The point was, it started me to look into whether the gospel I have today is the same gospel that existed in the 7th century, in its various forms, sort of spread out in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Because if it is, then what's he referring to?
Yeah.
I, as a Muslim, do not believe that God speaks nonsense.
Yeah.
He wouldn't ask them to go to a corrupt book.
Yes.
If there's any evidence that the book I have today is the only book available that would make any sense to a Christian, to a person of the gospel,
right,
to look at, then I have an evidentiary problem. I have a problem. I have to either reconform what I think about Islam, or try to make this the Bible and the Qur'an mixed together.
Right.
But you see, the dilemma there is for me was huge.
Right.
I had built up an identity as someone who was a defender of Islam, as someone who was a preacher of Islam. Within myself was very proud of who I was as a Muslim.
Yes.
And so I'm faced with this possible identity suicide.
Yeah.
I've got to die to myself, so to speak. And
where'd you get that language?
Well, exactly. And I think part of that is the conviction that happens there. I didn't remember that language.
Yeah.
It was just something within me.
Abdul, I want to stop you just for a moment to make sure that our listeners are following your logic. I think I am, but I want to convey that to them because this is such an important apologetic for the Christian faith. What you're saying, and stop me if I'm wrong, you're saying that in the Quran, in Islam, there's plenty of evidence, especially here and other places, that Muhammad, that supposedly Allah through the angel Jibreel to Muhammad, says to the Ahl al-Kitab, and in this case the people of the Anjil, definitely Christians, to read and to follow their book, because in that book there is guidance and light. Therefore Muhammad himself puts the seal of approval on the authenticity of the Christian New Testament at the time that he was alive. Now, is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes.